Hello and welcome to Iowa Primetime Live. Iowa at the voice of college football, everybody. How are we doing tonight? It's a Thursday. It's almost Friday, almost Christmas, New Year's. College football playoff games, bowl season is right on the precipice. We are very close to, one of the best times of the entire college football calendar here with this bowl season and with the college football playoff. A lot to talk about with Iowa news as well. Big move on the coaching staff. How will that affect the Hawkeyes going forward? We're going to dive deep into Vanderbilt. What are they good at? Where are they going to give Iowa some trouble? And where can the Hawkeyes potentially find an advantage in the Rely Quest Bowl in just under 2 weeks? And then we're going to end the show with some season superlatives for the Iowa football team. Offensive MVP, defensive MVP, most improved player, and all of the above. Any superlative that you can possibly think of, we're going to cover on the show tonight for the Iowa 2025 regular season. My name is Zach Heine, by the way. Thank you for tuning in to the show tonight. This is Iowa Primetime Live, Iowa at the voice of college football. Make sure you're following me on X at Zach_Heine. And you can follow my written work at Hawkeyes Wire. Make that your one-stop shop every single day for anything Iowa athletics related: football, basketball, wrestling, Indiana Fever, whatever is on your mind for Iowa athletics. Make sure that we're checking that out. And of course, make sure you're following the voice of college football at the VOCFB. As we get here into college football playoff and bowl game season, going to be a lot going on all of our channels, and so make sure that you're following us at the VOCFB, and that handle is at the bottom of your screen if you need it for the rest of the show. Let's jump right in without any further ado to some big news in the coaching staff for Iowa. Maybe some unexpected turnover, as it was announced today. Kirk Ferentz talking to the media that LeVar Woods is no longer going to be the special teams coordinator at Iowa. He is off to Michigan State to join new head coach Pat Fitzgerald's coaching staff. LeVar Woods will be the special teams coordinator and an assistant head coach with the Spartans next season. He's officially leaving Iowa after 17 years on the coaching staff for LeVar Woods, after he played 3 years with Iowa from 1998 to 2000. He spent about 6 years in the NFL. And he came back to Iowa. He was an administrative assistant from 2008 to 2011. He was an outside linebackers and special teams coach from 2012 to 2014. He was a tight ends and special teams coach from 2015 to 2017. And then from 2018 to this past year, 2025, he has been Iowa's special teams coordinator, which has been a really good special teams unit for Iowa, a very consistent group over his tenure. I mean, all Americans left and right at a ton of different positions. Iowa special teams have really kind of flourished under LeVar Woods, and he's gone. And he gave a really great exit press conference today, just talking about how much Iowa means to him, how much the opportunity to be with this program for so many years has done for his career, and you could tell that he was genuinely very thankful for his time in Iowa City. And he mentioned that moving on to Michigan State is the next step for him in terms of becoming a head coach, and that's really what he wants to be at the college football level. Ultimately, is a head coach. And going to Michigan State, where he can not only be the special teams coordinator, but also be an assistant head coach under Pat Fitzgerald, is really going to be a good thing for LeVar Woods in his coaching career that he's trying to get going here. He's only 47 years old, and so, I mean, there's plenty of time for him to work up the ranks, and this is kind of the next logical step for LeVar Woods. And so, sad to see him go. Obviously, Iowa is going to miss him and what he's meant to that special teams unit and to the program as a whole, but also happy to see him moving on up to his next opportunity and a chance to be more involved with the football program. And who knows? I mean, I'm not saying anything, but I don't have any reports, but maybe in 2 or 3 years, when Kirk Ferentz ultimately retires, maybe LeVar Woods is the guy who comes back to Iowa as that head coach after a few years, kind of, you know, brushing up on his coaching skills over in East Lansing. Wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. But LeVar Woods no longer with the Hawkeyes, uh, as he leaves on happy terms to head off to Michigan State. I didn't catch if he's going to still coach the bowl game for Iowa or if he's gone today. I wasn't able to catch that in the press conference, but a great career at Iowa for LeVar Woods, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see him again on the Iowa sideline sometime down the line. Would not surprise me one bit. But happy for LeVar Woods that he's able to get this opportunity. It is our call-in show, so I'm going to put this link in the chat here if you want to hop on and talk about LeVar Woods leaving. Where does Iowa special teams go from here? Iowa's bowl game opponent in Vanderbilt, or anything Iowa football related. Is that link in the description or in the chat? You just put the into your browser. It'll lead you into our StreamYard page, and I'll bring you on to talk about whatever you want to talk about Iowa football related. My man Kelvin Fisher in the chat. LeVar resume building, happy for him, no doubt about that. And Kelvin says that he will be here for the bowl game. So LeVar Woods is going to finish out this season in Iowa City. Love to see that from him. Really great news that he's going to be there for the ReliaQuest Bowl. And his kid, yes, is staying at Iowa as a tight end, which is good. LeVar Woods did talk about his son's kind of feeling like this was home for his son and staying with the program, which is good news. So there will be a Woods on the Iowa football program next year. It just won't be LeVar. I see he will be up in East Lansing. Iowa does not play Michigan State next year, I don't believe. And so they'll have to wait a bit longer to get LeVar Woods or to have a reunion with LeVar Woods. I'm checking right now, and they don't play Michigan State next year. I don't know if they play them in 2027 potentially. Nope, not in 2027 either. We got to keep going to find when they play them next. 2028. There it is. In 2028 at Michigan State. So that'll be the next time that we get to see Iowa and LeVar Woods kind of reunite in a few years. But happy for LeVar Woods. Always sad to see a great Hawk, leave the program, but it's on good terms and it's good for him. And so LeVar Woods no longer the special teams coordinator at Iowa. We'll see who the Hawkeyes decide to bring in to fill that role. I'm not super familiar with the entire coaching staff off the top of my head, so I'm not sure if there's an internal candidate potentially that Kirk Ferentz will choose to go with, or if he wants to go out of the building for that special teams coordinator. We'll see. We've seen Kirk Ferentz kind of do both over his time at Iowa. We've seen him promote from within with a couple of coordinators, and then more recently we've seen him go out of the program to hire a Tim Lester, which has been a pretty good move for that offense. And so we'll see where Kirk Ferentz decides to go with that special teams coordinator, but LeVar Woods will not be with the program next year. Let's talk about this bowl game, though, a bit more. The ReliaQuest Bowl against Vanderbilt. Before we get into the actual game, I do want to talk about the elephant in the room with Vanderbilt and with the Heisman ceremony. Diego Pavia. He finished as a runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. Indiana's Fernando Mendoza did win the award. Very happy for him. I think it's a very well-deserved honor for him. He was great all year. Diego Pavia does not win. He's the runner-up to the Heisman Trophy, and he handles it less than ideally if you're a fan of optics. So Diego Pavia, after the ceremony, posts a picture to his Instagram story, a picture of him and some family. And the caption is, F the voters, brothers for life. A very clear shot at the Heisman Trophy voters who didn't vote him to win the Heisman Trophy. Not a great look But on its own, like, you can maybe look past it. But unfortunately for Diego Pavia, that wasn't the end of his night. As following the ceremony, he decided to hit the town in New York with his buddies, hit up the clubs in New York City, and nothing good ever happens after midnight, especially in New York, and especially at a club. And Diego Pavia was ordering some drinks, ordering some wine or whatever. I don't even know what he was ordering, and uh, he had a sign up that said "F Indiana." Another clear shot at Fernando Mendoza and how mad that Diego Pavia was that he missed out on winning the Heisman Trophy. And so those two things together just really made for a bad look for Diego Pavia. And some PR specialists jumped in and said, hey, Diego, like, this is a terrible look for you. You need to apologize. And they wrote up a statement for him, and he posted the statement to his social media. I don't think Diego Pavia wrote up a single word of that statement. I don't think he cares about that statement. I don't think he is remorseful for his actions. This is not the kind of guy that he is. And you could maybe look past this if this is some 19-year-old kid who it's his first time in the spotlight and he acts a little immature. Like, you can maybe look past it, like a Johnny Manziel, who arguably did worse things than Diego Pavia. But Johnny Manziel was a young kid, like, just broke onto the scene, and he made some big mistakes. But at least at least he had youth as an excuse. It's not like a great excuse for me, but you could pull that out for him. Diego Pavia is what, 24 years old? I'm going to check right now. I think he's 24 years old. He's 23. He turns 24 in February. He's a sixth-year senior. He's been around college football for a while. He broke out last year, really, at Vanderbilt when they had a good year. And then, he built on that this year, and he had a really good season on the field. Like, there's a reason he was the Heisman Trophy runner-up. He was really good on the field. But his attitude off of it has really rubbed a lot of people, myself included, the wrong way. Because there's just no humility there. There's no humility. It's all about him all the time. When he's pushing for the Heisman Trophy, he's never talking about his teammates. He's never talking about how good his teammates are or how much they help him out on the field. It's always about how good he is. It's always about how deserving he is. And when he compared it to Fernando Mendoza, and his Heisman Trophy speech was fantastic. He was thanking his teammates, his coaching staff, his family. Like, you would never hear Diego Pavia say that. And with a quarterback, it is so much about an attitude. And I think Diego Pavia on the field has a great attitude. I mean, he is a guy that wants to win. He is a guy that is a ruthless competitor. And you really appreciate that. But off the field, he is just such a pain in the butt to deal with. I mean, there's always something new with this guy. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be, hopefully it's in this bowl game with Iowa. Maybe it's in the NFL draft process. Maybe it's a post-football thing. Like, at some point, Diego Pavia is going to be humbled. And it's going to be good for him. Like, Johnny Manziel was humbled. He was a first-round pick with the Browns, and he flamed out. He was a complete bust, and he was humbled. Still kind of an ass, but he was humbled a bit. I think Diego Pavia needs something similar to happen to him. I'm not wishing any kind of negativity, like nothing. Like, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But right now, he is just so self-centered and egotistical almost that if you're an NFL team, why the hell would you ever want him in your building? I mean, first of all, I don't think he's going to have much success in the NFL because of his size. I think he's 5'9". you don't see short quarterbacks very often, be great in the NFL. Drew Brees is really one of the only exceptions to that. But then his attitude, especially, you're able to get away with it in college like that. In the NFL, you're not going to be able to get away with that. You humble up or you get out the building. And I don't know if he has the ability to do that. So this might be, one of his last meaningful football games coming up in about 2 weeks against Iowa in the ReliaQuest Bowl. And maybe Iowa's the one to humble him a little bit with that Iowa defense and the Phil Parker defense. Because it was a terrible look. It was a terrible look and a bad ending to what was a great season on the field for Diego Pavia. And unfortunately for him, this is going to be how people perceive him as a person and as a player going forward, which isn't fair because of what he's done on the field. But he brought it onto himself with his actions, and actions speak louder than words. I'm not buying a single word of that apology that he posted to social media that has PR stunt written all over it. Diego Pavia is in his own head right now, and hopefully he's able to get that figured out here soon. But he's going to take the field in Tampa in about 2 weeks to face Iowa in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Vanderbilt, what do they bring to the table? What should concern you if you're an Iowa fan? And what areas do the Hawkeyes potentially have the advantage? We are going to talk about all of that and do some season superlative awards too right after this.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
And thank you to Mark Rogers for that. We got Kelvin Fisher back in the chat. Mendoza Pavia is like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. I see where you're going with that, Kelvin Fisher. I would push back a little bit. At least Angel Reese is a successful pro. At least she's a successful pro. I don't think Diego Pavia is going to sniff an NFL active roster at any point. So at least Angel Reese has done some good stuff in the WNBA. Whereas I don't think Diego Pavia is going to have any success in the NFL. But I see where the comparison is coming from there. And thank you for that, Kelvin Fisher. Let's talk about Vanderbilt here. I'm going to pull up a site here with their overall stats from this season. All right, here we go. Overall stats. Let's take a look at Vanderbilt offensively. They're averaging just under 39 points per game, which is a top 10 in the country. 467.8 yards per game. Top 10 in the country. They are top 10 in points per play. They are number 1 in yards per play, averaging over 7 yards a play, which is wild. They're top 10 in third down conversion. They're not bad at fourth down conversion. Red zone scoring percentage, middle of the pack there. So maybe a chance for Iowa to take advantage of that. Defensively, they're giving up about 23.5 points per game, which is top 50 nationally. They're giving up almost 376 yards per game, which is middle of the pack. Opponents' points per game or points per play. Other top 50 opponent yards per play at 5.4. Middle of the pack. Opponent third down conversion. They are pretty low down there, 110th, as they're allowing 44.23 on third down, opponent fourth down, top 100, and opponent red zone scoring, middle of the pack. And so if you're looking at that there, I mean, this Vanderbilt offense is really good. Like Diego Pavia has, I disregard the actions off the field for a bit. On the field, he's been electric this year. He's completing a ton of his, near 70% of his passes. Not turning the ball over very much. He's rushed for 900 yards and 9 touchdowns as well. I mean, a true dual threat option there for the Commodores, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on Iowa and a lot of pressure on those linebackers: Carson Shire, Jaden Harrell, Jaden Montgomery. Because you're going to see Vanderbilt try and run some RPOs. You're going to see him, put Diego Pavia out of motion and see, is he going to throw or is he going to run? And it's going to put those linebackers in a really difficult spot in terms of what they choose to do, and we'll see how Iowa wants to adjust with that. Vanderbilt's defense has been pretty good too. I mean, it's not an elite unit by any sense of the matter. It's not the Iowa defense, but it's good enough to get 10 wins in the SEC, which is saying a lot. That's a really, really good conference. And so it's no slouch that Vanderbilt defense is not a unit. It's not scrubs, but they're not elite. So maybe there's a chance there for Iowa to put some points on the board potentially. Look at Vanderbilt running the ball there. They are rushed for a 5.8 yards per carry, which is number 2 nationally. And they rush for 185 yards per game. They give up 108 yards on the ground, but only 3.7 yards per carry. So their rush defense, pretty good there for Vanderbilt. The passing offense and defense, Vanderbilt is top 10 in completion percentage, top 10 in yards per pass. They're top 15 in passing yards per game. That's just about 283. But they give up quite a bit through the air there. They're giving up 7.1 yards per pass, but they're giving up 267 passing yards a game. They're giving up about 67% completion percentage. So, that is something that could potentially be an area that Iowa takes advantage of. And we know Iowa isn't a huge passing offense. They didn't pass for 200 yards in a single game all season. But Vanderbilt gets up 267 per game through the air. A chance potentially for the Hawkeyes to find a rhythm passing the ball, which hasn't been easy for them this year at all. But Mark Gronowski in this last collegiate football game, does he have a special performance in him? Because as good as the Iowa as good as the Iowa defense is, Vanderbilt's going to score some points. They are going to put points on the board, and Iowa's going to have to keep up. They're going to have to make sure that they're not, falling behind 2-3 possessions. Like, you kind of want to go blow for blow here with Vanderbilt. I think that's probably Iowa's best chance to win. I think it's nice to think that this Iowa defense could just completely shut down Vanderbilt. I would love that if they only give up 10 points and get multiple turnovers. I think it's possible, but I think Vandy's probably scoring at least 21, 24 points this game at the very least. So if you're Iowa, you got to punch back. And it looks like going through the air might be your best opportunity to do that against this Vanderbilt offense or defense, excuse me. Let's take a look very quickly at the individual player stats here for Vanderbilt, because it's kind of fun to break down. So we've talked about Pavia and his 3,200 passing yards with 27 touchdowns to 8 picks, completing over 71% of his passes. He's also their leading rusher, 826 yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns. But don't sleep on Cedric Alexander as well, with 11 touchdowns on the ground to lead the team. Also has rushed for 5.5 yards per carry. McCowan Young as well, 410 yards, 9 yards a carry, and 6 touchdowns. So keep an eye on those running back duo for Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia does handle quite a bit of the load on the ground, but Alexander and Young could factor it into this game as well for Vandy. So keep an eye on that for the Iowa defense. In the receiving game, tight end Eli Stowers won the Mackey Award, which is given to the best tight end in the country. And these stats prove why he got that: a team leading 62 receptions, a team leading 769 yards to go along with 4 touchdowns. Wide receiver Trey Richardson had 40 catches for 679 yards and 6 touchdowns. Junior Sherrill, the wide receiver, led the team with 7 receiving touchdowns with 661 receiving yards, 46 grabs. Looks like those 3 are kind of the big options in the receiving game. Richie Hoskins got involved a little bit along with the running backs, but Stowers, Richardson, and Sherrill are going to be the guys to keep an eye on in the receiving game for Vanderbilt and that Iowa defense, which hopefully will have TJ Hall back in that secondary, and should have Cohen Entringer playing in this game as well. As Kirk Ferentz did mention today in his press conference that as of now, he expects Cohen Entringer to return to the program next year, which you would assume means that he's playing in this bowl game here in about 2 weeks. The place kicking for Vanderbilt, Brock Taylor handles most of those duties. Didn't kick many field goals this year. He was extra points. He was really good. Only missed 1 all season, but just 11 of 12 from our on field goals this year. His 1 miss came from that 40 to 49 yard range, long of 51 yards, but only 12 field goal attempts. And so that tells me that Vanderbilt, very aggressive offense. They're going to go for a lot of 4th and shorts, potentially in field goal range. But if you are able to hold them to kicks, Brock Taylor has been good in a limited sample size, but maybe there's an opportunity there to, force a miss with a guy who hasn't kicked a whole lot this season. We'll see if Iowa can take advantage of that. With LeVar Woods, his last game as the special teams coordinator, maybe he dials up a nice field goal block or a punt block. We'll see. We shall see. Defensively for the Commodores, linebacker Bryce Longwell leads them in total tackles with 67. Also has a sack and a pick as well. Safety CJ Hurd, linebacker Langston Patterson also pitching in over 60 total tackles. The sack leaders, no one, with a big, individual sack total. Vanderbilt had 29 sacks as a team. Miles Capers had 4.5 to lead the way. Zaylin Wood with 4. Corday Sidnor with 3.5, along with Nick Rinaldi, their linebacker, and then 3 for Linus Zunk. So no individual big sack total, but a unit with 29 sacks on the season that can kind of get after the quarterback a little bit, about 2.5 sacks per game for Vanderbilt. So keep an eye on that with this really good offensive line for Iowa, led, by the way, Remington Trophy Award winner Logan Jones. I forgot to mention that off the bat, but a big congrats to Logan Jones, who won the Remington Trophy. Which is given to the best center in all of college football. He's the second Hawkeye to win the award. Tyler Linderbaum 4 years ago also took home the honor. So a really great accomplishment there for Logan Jones. Turnover-wise, Vanderbilt had only 7 picks on the year. Martell Height, the corner, had 3. No one else had more than 1. So not a team that picks the ball off a lot this year. Look at the forced fumbles. They did have 12 forced fumbles, and they recovered 7 of those this season, led by Bryce Cowan, the linebacker, who had 4 of those forced fumbles. But again, what's that, 19 total turnovers this year? I mean, if you count the other recoveries, only 14 turnovers this year in 12 games for Vanderbilt. So a defense that doesn't force too many turnovers. And so an opportunity for Iowa, take care of the football, find a rhythm through the air. You're going to have a really good opportunity to do some damage with this Vanderbilt defense. Not a bad unit. They're really good against the run. And we know Iowa likes to run the ball, so it's going to be kind of a mano-a-mano matchup there with Iowa's ground game versus the Vanderbilt rush defense. But an opportunity through the air for Iowa to get some things going, and then as well with just not turning the ball over, not a super opportunistic Vanderbilt defense. So an opportunity there for the Hawkeyes to do some damage offensively in Mark Gronowski's final collegiate game. Iowa, it's going to be a fun atmosphere down there in Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay. Two teams that are honestly pretty evenly matched. On paper, Vanderbilt looks like the slightly better team, but Iowa's played some really good football this year. They played a couple teams really tight, and just have come up short. This is an opportunity to get that ranked losing streak over before next season starts. It can be off your docket, a fresh start next year. For this Iowa football program, which will be really nice if they can do that. So I'm excited for this matchup. We'll give my prediction here at the end of the show later on, but opportunities for Iowa in the passing game, not turning the ball over, and trying to slow down Diego Pavia. That's really going to be the key for Iowa. And I know that's a very basic, key to the game. Slow down the Heisman Trophy runner-up, but in this game, it's pretty simple with the Iowa defense. We got Kelvin Fisher saying Angel Reese is a deuce, just like Diego Pavia. Landon says, I'll join in a bit if you have time. Yeah, I'm going to be on up until about 7 o'clock tonight. So I'll put that link back in the chat here too. I know it's up there as well, but I'll put the link right down here for anyone who wants to hop on and talk some Iowa football. That link is in the chat right there. We're going to take one more break here. And when we come back, Iowa football superlatives for the 2025 season. Who stood out the most? Who's the MVP? Who's the most improved? Who's the rookie of the year? We're going to break all of that down after this.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And thank you to Mark Rogers for that. Welcome back to Iowa Primetime Live, Iowa at the Voice of College Football. My name is Zach Heine. This is our call-in show as well, so I've got that link in the chat. If you want to hop on, talk about anything Iowa football related, I would love to have you. But also just keep it going in the chat, in the comments as well. We love the interaction and things for me to work off of there. Iowa football superlatives. And it's tough. I'm breaking out the red pen in this on the show tonight to hand out some of the biggest awards for Iowa. We're going to be talking about the offensive MVP, the defensive MVP, the overall MVP, the most improved player on the roster, other rookie of the year, like your first year starter who really broke out this year, along with a couple of other awards too. So really fun to break that down. Let's get started here though with the big ones. Offensive MVP. And there's a couple of different ways to go about this award. And there's a couple of guys that are more than deserving of winning not a trophy from me. You get my love and affection. That's what you get for winning this award, the offensive MVP for the Iowa football team in 2025. I was tempted to just give it to the entire offensive line because of how good they were this year, because they won, or they're a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. Logan Jones won the Remington Trophy. As Kelvin Fisher says, 4 or 5 O-line guys had a first-team All-American. Lauk, the only a PFF guy who, the only highest PFF guy who didn't get one. Yeah, I mean, everyone's so deserving on that offensive line. But that's probably a bit of a cop-out, unfortunately. Mark Gronowski, really did some great things with this Iowa offense, kind of revolutionized them and gave them some really good quarterback play for the first time in years with those rushing touchdowns. Receivers, no one really stood out like overall on the entire season. We saw DJ Vanami break out there at the end. Reese Van Der Zee making some plays. Running backs was kind of a running back by committee with all the injuries, so no one really broke out there. So you know what? My show, my rules. I am giving the offensive MVP to the entire Iowa offensive line because I feel I just can't pick out one guy. Like, sure, I could say Logan Jones, which would probably make sense because he won the Remington Trophy. He's been on virtually every single All-American team that's been released as a first-team member. It makes a lot of sense if I were to just pick him, but then I'd be throwing out the contributions from a James Dunker, who was really good this year over at right tackle, from Bo Stevens, who received some All-American nods at left guard, Cade Pieper breaking out at right guard, and as Kelvin Fisher mentioned, Trevor Lauk was the highest grade PFF guy over at left tackle. He was really good this year. It's like picking a favorite child. I can't do it. I can't do it. The entire Iowa offensive line is my offensive MVP. Shout out to George Barnett for his work with that unit. What a job there, as they've kind of developed into one of the best offensive lines in all football, and wouldn't surprise me if they end up winning the Joe Moore Award. I'm not sure when that's announced, but would not shock me at all if they take that trophy home. It'd be very deserved for Iowa. It'd be their first Joe Moore Award in about 10 years. So hopefully they're able to bring that back to Iowa City and keep bringing the lumber home. But the entire offensive line is my MVP on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive MVP. This one's a bit more spread out because if you had asked me preseason, my pick, I'd probably say someone along the D line, and Ethan Hurkett and Aaron Graves and Max Llewellyn, who all had really good years up front. No one had a crazy stat line. No one had 10 sacks or a bunch of TFLs, but they were playing really good football. The linebackers got a lot better as the season went on, but there were still some kinks in the armor early on for a Carson Shire and Jaden Harrell, but they got a lot better as the season went on. But I'm inclined to go with the secondary. And there's so many options in the secondary. And no, I'm not going to just pick the Iowa secondary for my defensive MVP. Don't worry. I got one cop out. I don't get two. I'm going to pick one guy. And I've kind of gone back and forth on this the entire year. But my defensive MVP, with it by a close margin, is TJ Hall. TJ Hall, if you just look at the box score, if you just look at the stats, they don't jump off the page for TJ Hall. He missed a couple games there late in the year. He had one pick. He had 8 passes defensed. But my gosh, did he eliminate one side of the field with his coverage? That's what you want from a cover corner. Yeah, he only had one pick because no one was throwing his way because he was locking down receivers. TJ Hall, I mean, his breakout this year, he could win the Breakout Player of the Year award too. Honestly, he was good last year, but really stepping up with Jamari Harris gone. TJ Hall, TJ Hall had a fantastic year on the outside, and he really opened it up so that those safeties didn't have to worry, didn't have to focus too much on giving him help. Like, you felt pretty comfortable with TJ Hall as your lockdown corner. Really, really great work from him. I was close to picking an X, who I think had a fantastic second half of the season. Zach Lutmer was very consistent this year, and I'm super happy about him breaking out because that was my breakout pick preseason, and it worked out to perfection. As Kelvin Fisher says, Kirk picked Mark Gronowski and Zach Lutmer as MVPs. I was close on both of those guys. I was really close. I almost picked Lutmer defensively. I was super close, but I just have to give a shout out to TJ Hall for the work that he put in locking down one side of the field for that Iowa defense. Really made Phil Parker's life a lot easier when he's mapping out coverages, knowing that you have a guy that you feel really good about taking out a top receiver. And TJ Hall was great this year. All right, we've named the offensive and the defensive MVPs for the Iowa team. I'm going to save overall MVP until the end of the show. We're going to talk about the breakout candidates here in just a second, but I've got a caller joining me here. Landon hopping on to talk some Hawks. How are we doing tonight?
Doing well, man. How are you doing?
I am doing good, Landon. Thanks for hopping on with me. It's good to talk to you. What's on your mind, man? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I saw obviously the news about LeVar Woods earlier today. Just big news. I just was thinking about how that could affect how Phil Parker makes his decision. I understand maybe he's going to retire in the next couple of years, but it just really made me think, would he leave to go to Michigan State? I know he's an alum of Michigan State and he knows Pat Fitzgerald pretty well. So just what the future of Iowa's special teams, I think LeVar Woods leaving is a bigger deal than we think. I mean, look at what Iowa's done in the special teams game over the last couple of years with Torrey Taylor and Drew Stevens. Like, what's your opinion on him leaving?
Yeah, on LeVar Woods leaving, it's a big loss there for Iowa. I mean, it's just a guy that's been around the program for over 15 years as a coach. He played at Iowa. I mean, he's someone that's been a great ambassador of the Iowa football culture. He's been a guy that, Kirk Ferentz has mentioned multiple times as being super important to what, he does and what he brings to the coaching staff. And it's going to be a big loss for Iowa. There's no doubt about that. Like, when you look at Kirk Ferentz, he's a special teams guy too. Like, he values, that position in that part of the game more than a lot of coaches do. And so you would hope that there's not a super big drop off there, but LeVar Woods was very beloved and now he's off to Michigan State. And as you mentioned, Phil Parker, I don't think Phil Parker will follow. I think Phil is probably going to end his career in Iowa City. I'd be very surprised if he leaves Iowa at any time, especially with him kind of getting up there in age. You just kind of feel like he's set as one of the best coordinators in all of college football. And I'm sure he's paid about that well. And so I don't think that Phil Parker will depart the program, but I didn't think that LeVar Woods was leaving anytime soon either. And he's off to Michigan State. So I don't know anything. I don't know anything at all when it comes to that. But I think Phil Parker will stay. But LeVar Woods is definitely a big loss for this Iowa football program. And also losing Drew Stevens to graduation, losing Caden Weechin to graduation. It's going to be some big changes for that unit next year. And so we'll see who Iowa brings in to be that new coordinator and how things look with an overall pretty new special teams next year.
Yeah, I actually agree with that a lot. I think it's going to be a really different program with Iowa. And I just think we've just had so many consistent years of great kickers, Keith Duncan, Caleb Shudak, and now Drew Stevens. So to see where it goes next, I think, obviously special teams is such an important piece of Iowa's game. But I guess my other question for you would just be, what's like your opinion right now on the future of this Iowa offense? Obviously our offense is actually, I think, wide receiver wise and running back wise is semi young. I mean, it's ish. Obviously, the offensive line is pretty veteran, but what's your take on this offense and what we can do better this offseason?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Iowa's offense has been a laughing stock for a while now. I mean, for the better part of this entire decade, when someone thinks about poor offensive play, that they think about Iowa. And it's unfortunate that that's the case. And I think Tim Lester is doing a great job of kind of reinventing that stereotype. And so Iowa's not as much of a punching bag offensively as they were a few years ago. It's going to be some big changes. Mark Gronowski no doubt changed this offense and changed the program with what he was able to bring, as a runner, but also just as a gamer. Like, he was a quarterback that, wasn't afraid of the big moment. He led some great drives. That last drive against Oregon was fantastic. Unfortunately, they couldn't grab the win there at the end. And I think they probably beat Indiana if Mark Gronowski is healthy in that fourth quarter. And so it's hard to replace that kind of gamer mentality that he brought, and then obviously what he did on the ground. But as you mentioned, it's pretty young skill guys around the quarterback next year. That running back room, Kamari Moulton, Jazz Patterson, Nathan McNeil, Xavier Williams, all are eligible to return next year. Wide receivers, Reese Vanderzee and Dayton Howard are going to be back next year. DJ Vanami, Addison Ostrenga, and even Zach Ortworth are back in that tight end room. And so, some great weapons there for whoever the quarterback is to throw to next year, and to hand the ball off to. The offensive line, as you mentioned, is a bit more veteran. Logan Jones, James Dunker, and Bo Stevens are all going to be gone. But you do return Trevor Lauk and Cade Pieper, who I thought had really good years on that offensive line. And I keep an eye on a Cannon Leonard or a Jack Dochler for that right tackle spot, and a Leighton Jones at left guard. I think Iowa's going to be pretty good on the offensive line. And so we'll see who the quarterback is. And it sounds like it's going to be Hank Brown or Jeremy Heklinski, as Kirk Ferentz mentioned, not wanting to bring in another quarterback option right now. And so one of those guys is going to have a ton of time in Tim Lester's system to keep learning it and to keep getting better. And he's going to have some nice weapons around him next year. And so I think the goal should just be gradual improvement. Iowa's not going to be an offense that passes for 350 yards a game, and it's just an air out approach. Like, they're going to be an offense that sticks to the ground game and sticks to their identity. But I think they're going to continue to get better and can continue to kind of further themselves away from that, Iowa sucks as an offense narrative that has been around for so long.
Yeah. And I think that just leads into one of my last points. Like, I really look at next year as a really pivotal year for this Iowa team, because I would give Kirk Ferentz from a span to 1 to 4 years left with him in Iowa.
Yep.
We all know that. And so I think this could potentially be his last quarterback to play for Iowa, or one of his last. And I would really like him to develop a guy and go out with a quarterback. I understand Mark Gronowski did a great job. You would grade him somewhere in the Bs. I want to give him an A for this year, but somewhere in the Bs. But I think to get a quarterback that gets in a system for a long time, because what we've done wrong the past couple of years, from McNamara to Sullivan to now Gronowski, was that we just didn't have a quarterback that was in the system for more than 2 to 3 years. The last time we had that was Petrus, and obviously that didn't end up right. But to make a guy like Nate Stanley, I really like Jeremy Heklinski. He reminds me a little bit of kind of a Nate Stanley / Mark Gronowski comp a little bit. I think he has part of that to him. But I just think when you look at this 2026 schedule, it's hard. It's not as hard as this year, but I think Iowa could find a lot of success depending how the schedule turns out to look format-wise. So if they bunch up the Michigan-Ohio State games like right next to each other, I don't know when the schedule comes out, but I'm really curious to see what it's going to look like when it comes out. Yeah,
I'm really curious about that too, because it's those two games that are really the most difficult when you look at Iowa's schedule next year. They get Ohio State. I think they get them at home next year, which will be good. Which is great that they don't have to go to the shoe to face Ohio State again, but they do have to go on the road to Ann Arbor. And then the rest of the Big Ten slate isn't terrible. They're at Illinois, who is going to be losing a ton of talent as well next year. They're home against Nebraska. They're home against Purdue, home against Wisconsin, at Minnesota, at Northwestern, and then at Washington. And so not a super tough Big Ten schedule, and they get Iowa State at home this year, and an Iowa State program with a new head coach, with potentially a new quarterback if Rocco Bet decides to follow Matt Campbell over to Penn State. And so I think it's setting up well for at least 9 wins. I would say anything less than 9 wins right now. It's still so early. We don't know what the roster looks like. We don't know who's going to break out in camp, or who's going to leave or come in. But I would say that just initial looks at the 2026 schedule, anything less than 9 wins would feel like a failure right now, because I look at home against Ohio State at at Michigan. Even if you lose both of those games, I think every other game is very winnable. At Washington could be tough. That's a really great home field advantage, but I really do think 9 wins is pretty attainable for Iowa. And if they're able to pull an upset over one of those teams, I wouldn't mind, or I wouldn't rule out 10 wins potentially either, which in this day and age could be more than good enough for a college football playoff berth. We'll see a 10-2 with a win over an Ohio State or a Michigan. That might be good enough for Iowa to get in. So we'll see what the roster looks like. But as to your thought with this potentially being Kirk Ferentz's last quarterback, it's a really good thought. I hadn't really thought about it like that, because I do think he's only got a couple years left here at Iowa. And Jeremy Hecklinski is kind of my guy that I'm eyeing.
Me too.
I think he's got a bit of a higher ceiling than a Hank Brown. I think maybe Hank Brown's floor right now is a bit higher, but I'm kind of shooting for the higher upside with a guy like Jeremy, who would have multiple years of eligibility left. He's only going to be a sophomore next year. And so, it's a guy that you could really develop in this program and have multiple years within Tim Lester's system. And so I'm eyeing a Jeremy Hecklinski as a guy that could break out and be Iowa's quarterback next year, and potentially the final big quarterback in Kirk Ferentz's tenure. We'll see about that. But that's what I'm thinking. And Lennon, I wanted to ask you, because we're talking about some season superlatives for Iowa, and I was moving into the biggest breakout candidate. Before you hopped on right there, who's your biggest breakout candidate on the offense and the defense for Iowa this year? A guy that you didn't really know a lot about preseason. You didn't know what they were going to bring, and they ended up playing some really good football.
Well, offense is pretty obviously for me, DJ Vanami. I mean, he really restored my faith in Iowa tight ends. I mean, Addison Restringa goes down in the second game of the year, and you get a guy and enter DJ Vanami, and no one can pronounce his name for the first couple weeks, and then he's out there catching passes and caught that touchdown against Oregon, had a great game at SC and then at Nebraska. He was definitely my offensive he was definitely my favorite player to watch in the offense. I did like to see some stuff from the young wide receivers. I think KJ Parker was a very underestimated wide receiver. He did some great plays on the special teams. Defensive-wise, I think this team is a little bit obviously more veteran, a little bit older on the defensive side. We obviously talked about the offensive line. But I say there were a lot of defensive guys this year that I think really showed up that maybe weren't young, but were in some of their first years of experience in the game. But definitely the youngest guy that I thought has a lot of potential, and I know he didn't get a lot of gameplay, but they're saying could really play well in this bowl game, is Cam Buffington. I don't know how much play time he's going to get, but he had that pick at Minnesota. And then obviously Zach Lutzmer, which he's a junior, but I think he's a junior, but
a sophomore.
He's a sophomore. Okay.
Yep.
He is a young player. So him and Buffington, I think, could really be the future of the Iowa defense. How about you?
Yeah. I was thinking offensively, DJ Vanami, of course, is a great candidate there. I was really impressed early on with Xavier Williams, and then he kind of fell in the depth chart when Kamari Moulton got back healthy. But I think along the offensive line, Cade Pieper really impressed me at right guard. I think he's a guy. He's a sophomore now. I mean, he might be a first round pick in the 2027 NFL draft. I mean, he really impressed me this year with what he did along the offensive line. So keep an eye on him going forward. Defensively, I mentioned Zach Lutzmer as well. I think he was great. Also, shout out. I know that he had been on the roster for a couple of years and played a lot of football, but Deshaun Lee, I thought, really stepped up his game, especially in the second half of the season.
Oh yeah.
I'm really it was the entire Iowa defense, but him especially after that Rutgers game where the defense kind of got torched. They really played some great football for most of that Big Ten schedule, and Deshaun Lee really impressed me in that DB room. He'll return next year as a senior, so really excited to see what he can do. But Deshaun Lee, I think really had a breakout year, and if you're Iowa, I think you feel pretty good about where you're at with that DB room heading into next year, even with losing a guy like TJ Hall.
Yeah, you got to feel really good, especially because when you look at this year's team, you look at the way the season was so cool because at the beginning of the season, you were like, is this even Iowa's defense? They were allowing big plays. They were, they allowed Rutgers to score 28 points on them. And for a while, I didn't know if they were going to stop Rutgers on a drive. But the way that, this season just felt so weird because it's like the first couple weeks up until the Indiana game, you're 3-2 at the end of September. And you're like, this might end up being a 6-6, 7-5 season. And then you go undefeated in October and you're like, we could make the playoffs. And then you kind of fall back down to earth. So the way that I think Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz, the thing that we always forget as Iowa fans is Iowa starts off season so slow. You cannot expect them to come into week one and look like their best. They're built to play November football. And I think we forget that so much, and we expect them to go and blow out all these teams. And I think it hurts because we're not at our best in week 2 when we play Iowa State, who I don't know how good they're going to be next year, but the past 2 years, they have been better than us. I don't think overall as a season, I think we were better than Iowa State this year and last year, or maybe not last year, but I think we just in the first 2 weeks were not better than Iowa State this year and last year. And I think that's something we can improve on because it would be really nice to be able to look better next year now that we have a group of guys that have been here for at least a year and can play well into next year.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about that. Iowa it's kind of a slow starting team, which, as you mentioned, like they want to play November football. They want to play really well there. And, if they can get out of that Iowa State game with a win, the rest of the non-con schedule isn't bad. They play Northern Illinois and Northern Iowa. And so they should be able to take care of business against those two teams. And so if they can beat Iowa State at home next year, it's going to set things up really well for the rest of that 2026 slate. And we'll see if Iowa can just get off to a bit of a faster start. In a new quarterback, new offensive line for the most part might take some more time, but hopefully they can get something going there, early on in the season.
Yeah,
it'd be really nice if they didn't start as slow every year.
Every year. And we're always complaining and burning jerseys in week 2. But you're right. Yeah. I agree with your points totally. I feel like, what we could definitely do better is see if we can just try to play more into Tim Lester's system, right? Like I felt the first 2 weeks of the season, like Kirk Ferentz was handcuffing Tim Lester and saying like, hey, like this is my team. That felt like very Brian Ferentz football in week 1 against Albany and Iowa State. But then it kind of opened up. So when we talk about later on in the season, I would really like to see Ohio State and Michigan be played in November. I want that game in late October towards November. I don't want to play Michigan in week 4 or week 5 in early September. Play an at Minnesota game, play an Illinois game, play a Purdue game. That Purdue game would be a great first Big Ten game. You play your first 3 home games and then go on the road to Purdue. Get something like that where you can get Iowa in a position where they play Ohio State at home in a blackout game in November, where maybe the stakes could be another Oregon type game where you win this game and you control your own destiny to go to a college football playoff. And that's what gets me wildly optimistic about Iowa football in 2026.
Yeah, no, I'm super pumped, and I'm excited to see who they add in the portal, especially along that defensive line. They're going to need a lot of work there with the guys leaving and potentially wide receivers as well to add. But I think it's going to be a fun year for Iowa next year, and 2026 is really setting up well, assuming that they can get some of these needs in the portal filled here in the upcoming couple months. One more question for you, Landon, because I'm going to go into it here at the end of the show. Who's your overall MVP? Offensive, defense, special teams, coaching staff, mascot, whoever you want to call out here for Iowa football in 2025. Who stood out to you the most?
That's a good question. I would definitely put Mark Gronowski up there, but I feel like he just was a little bit inconsistent this year. And I feel like I definitely think this is kind of like, I guess this isn't an underrated pick, but I really feel like Logan Jones showed up in every single game. I think it was either the USC or Oregon game. He got hurt for a bit, one of those games, and he came back in the game. And I just think like we take for granted how good our offensive line is. Like if you remember 3 years ago in 22, we were struggling to even run the ball. And so now like when we get mad when we only get 3 yards of play or something like that, like we are so lucky that we have such a great offensive line. So I would say Logan Jones, Bo Stevens, some of those guys, they just really played their butts off this year. And I would say they were my offensive MVP. But it's so hard to think of an overall MVP because I feel like every single guy this year had a time where they played some of their worst football and some of their best football, right? Every guy had a game where they just didn't play as well. But I would probably say maybe even overall, some of that offensive line just deserves the MVP for this season, because we don't win the Penn State game. Everybody says we don't win the Penn State game without Mark Gronowski. That's true. But I also don't think we win the Penn State game without our offensive line. There were so many games this year. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I am with you 100% there. I'll throw a shout out to Caden Weechin as well for that overall MVP. I think he was, a game changer. Every time that he touched the ball on a return, like you thought he was going to score. And I think it's some extra motivation for both sides of the ball. If you're the defense, you wanted to get that stop on third down to give him a chance to return a punt. If you're the offense, like you're waiting to see where you're going to start with the ball, because Caden Weechin is probably going to get you an extra 10, 15, 20 yards, every time. And so I feel like if I had to pick one guy, it would be Caden Weechin. But as you mentioned, like everyone on this team stepped up and on this season. Xavier Wampa really playing some good football late. Zach Lutmer playing well. The linebackers getting better every week. The offensive line doing great work. DJ Vanami stepping up late. Like it's really an overall team effort, as you mentioned, Landon. And so it's hard to pick an MVP, but Caden Weechin, I thought, had a really one hell of a season for Iowa. Any last thoughts from you, Landon, on this bowl game? Do you have a prediction? Does Iowa finally get that ranked losing streak off their backs?
Yeah, I've been really, this bowl game when it first got it intrigued me, because I was like, I wanted Iowa, Texas, but once Texas beat A&M, I was like, okay, we'll take Vandy. But just, this is like very, people say these are two similar teams, and I see it with their coaching staff, but I don't really see it with the offensive, right? You got a cocky guy in Diego, and you got a more, Mark has some cockiness to him, but it's more of a humble, hardworking guy. Both of them have played at the non-division high level before. So it's just going to be two guys going at it. I originally was like, I think Vandy's going to win, but as these weeks have gone on, I feel like Iowa has been such a good team this year when they're the underdogs, even though they haven't pulled out a lot of those games this year. I think this is the one where Iowa gets it done. And I can see this one coming down to a Drew Stevens field goal or something crazy. It always has to be something crazy, like the defense gets a late pick with 2 minutes or so to go, and Iowa marches down the field and wins the game. I got Iowa winning at 27-24. But again, thanks so much for having me on today, Zach. I run a smaller YouTube channel making Iowa Hawkeye content. I'm a young Iowa Hawkeye fan, diehard Iowa Hawkeye fan. So hopefully I can call into the show more over winter break. But I really appreciate what you do, man. As always.
And what's your YouTube channel?
Oh, yeah, my YouTube channel is Black and Gold Take with Landon Rank. So so maybe we can collab sometime.
Of course, Let me know, Landon. I really appreciate you hopping on, and would love to have you.
Yeah, what's the way
over winter break?
What's the way I could contact you real quick?
Oh yeah, I'm on X at Zach_Heine, just my name with the underscore between there. If you
I have X too. Okay,
we can do that. That sounds good, Landon. Nice to talk to you, man. I really appreciate it, and as you mentioned, go Hawks.
Yeah, go Hawks, man. Let's go. See you later, man.
I appreciate you, Landon. Thank you for hopping on to Iowa Primetime Live. I'm going to wrap it up here with a quick prediction of this bowl game. I got Iowa winning 30-27, high-scoring game. Iowa's due. They are due for a ranked win. They have played some really good football against ranked opponents this year, just haven't gotten that final result. I think they're I think they're due in this game. The offense makes some plays. The defense gives up some points, gives up some yards. But overall, they do enough to get the job done. Iowa wins 30-27, gets the bowl game streak off of the ranked losing streak off of their backs, and they can look ahead to 2026, which will be a very fun season. Kelvin Fisher says Kirk will stay until he breaks Woody Hayes' Big Ten conference record. I could definitely see that. No doubt about that. Tim says, I think Kirk will coach and finish after his 30th season, or coach until he's 75. 100%. I think Kirk he's got at least a few more years left in him. So Iowa fans will get to enjoy that for sure. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to the show. Thanks. I thank you to Landon for calling on to talk about Iowa football. Next Thursday is Christmas, and Thursday after that is New Year's Day. So there's not going to be a show next week because of the holiday. And maybe I'll probably end up doing a New Year's Day edition of the show with, our reaction to the bowl game. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks then for that Iowa post game or Iowa bowl game reaction. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Iowa Primetime Live. I will see you all in a couple of weeks, but until then, enjoy your holidays, enjoy your breaks, and as always, go Hawks.